Sam, you want to take it away?
Sure. Um, so, hello, everybody. Can you see my screen, John and team?
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to say I am thrilled to be here and to do anything I can to support John and his efforts. And so, with the governor's announcements about Penn Station and Tony Simone and the local electeds announced Penn Station, John asked me to come in and give folks an update. And what I wanted to do is I've shortened the deck I've used for a few recent presentations. We'll go through a little bit of the past because I think it's foundational to what we'll talk about. The overall thing, to start with the end in mind, is that we've had some positive developments from the governor and local elected officials to the effect that Block 780, the block immediately to the south of Penn Station, should be off limits for demolition. It doesn't mean they're out of the woods because the railroads may still want to demolish those blocks, but it's really isolated the railroads. And it's definitely in response to a lot of the efforts of this coalition. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the chairperson of Rethink NYC. I'm also the coordinator of the Empire Station Coalition that has some 15 constituent organizations, including Midtown South. And I'm the coordinator of the Penn Community Defense Fund. But anyway, there's Penn Station in its glory. There's Penn Station, a night shot that painting was based on. And, you know, we see that from 1963 to present, you would have thought with the demolition of Penn Station and the enactment of the landmarks law, we would stop tearing the neighborhood down, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And you can see there's the Hotel Pennsylvania's down, and those buildings with yellow X's were until recently subject to a double whammy from the GPP of the state and the railroads. Now it looks to be just the railroads that may be after those blocks. What are we talking about? Why are we talking about demolishing a neighborhood in order to improve a transit facility? Richard Ravitch, I think most of you know and respect, said you need a transit plan first, not a trumped up real estate scheme. So we've been advocating for modern operating model called through running, which would make the commuter trains coming through Penn Station run more like the subway. The Bronx, the D train starts up in the Bronx and comes through Midtown and goes way out into Brooklyn. And we think the commuter train should operate the same way with the Long Island Railroad going into New Jersey and the New Jersey Transit trains going out to Long Island. It would extend the connectivity, the access to the job markets, housing, and a whole host of other benefits that the subway brought to the outer boroughs, to the outlying counties. Just simply terminal station like Grand Central's up top, the trains stop at the station and go back in the opposite direction. Penn Station, for whatever its criticisms are, looks like the diagram below, and the trains come in from New Jersey and mostly go out to Sunnyside, and the trains from Long Island come in and go mostly out to the West Side yards. Just think about it. That's highly inefficient. You have all this big infrastructure, big equipment sitting there doing nothing all day when it could be running through to the other sides of the station. It's the way stations operate in Europe. It's the way they operate in Philadelphia, Toronto, Los Angeles. And at the bottom left, you see the railroads have fought this. They continue to fight it. And even though the governor and local electeds are trying to get Block 780 out of the crosshairs of the GPP, the railroads still have it in mind. And here's kind of the ridiculousness of this all. Before they even decided on what the track plan would be, or even what they would do with the station, they had all these buildings scheduled for demolition. They happen to be some buildings of historic preservation, as you're bent, that are by some of the finest architects in the world. The Hotel Penn was by McKim, Mead, and White. The Gimbels building to the right on 6th Avenue was by Daniel Burnham. Any number of these buildings are by absolute trophy architects. This was a clueless idea from the start. The claim is it's needed in order to double New Jersey transit capacity via terminal track south of the station. That's just not true. The real estate market didn't cooperate. This was at a rally that what you can't see is various people at Coalition were really harassing the governor during this press conference, and she became unglued and committed to allow any architect, any design firm, and any engineer to compete for a position to create a world-class masterpiece at Penn Station. We have not heard much from her since. However, in the fall, all of a sudden, she said, I've met with President Trump. He'd like to see Penn Station be beautiful again. She'd like to see it be beautiful again and as magnificent as the Moynihan. What she really means by that remains to be seen. But at about the same time period, Tony Simone and Erik Bottcher have proposed to amend the GPP. They have said, look, we'll have less density. We'll look to have parkland. You'll see they have parkland where the Hotel Pennsylvania was. And Block 780, you can see there's nothing on Block 780 there. Block 780 is off limits. This is not a perfect proposal, but it actually represents considerable progress. Eminent domain is off the table. To the extent any of these sites are developed, and this is just a concept release, there will be arm's length negotiations with the property owners. It will not be the state coming in and engulfing and devouring. They have upticked the affordable housing and residential component of it. You can see that in the screen up on the left. And they are trying to be responsive to a lot of what we've seen. Now, when they announced this, they, of course, had the unions with them. The unions are desperate for construction work. They don't care whether it's affordable housing or commercial. But since the commercial market is dead, they're all very happy to see this move towards the residential market. We're still evaluating this. But the fact that eminent domain is off the table and the fact that Block 780 are protected and the density is reducing and there is a more serious affordable housing commitment would be foolish not to be reasonably positive on this. And some of us are sending letters to the government. What's going to happen next? There are 4 proposals aspiring to be a world-class masterpiece at Penn Station. The one on the upper left is by the MTA. I'm indicating that this has been withdrawn. They presently are indicating they are so broke that they need to smack some big HVAC towers on the outside of the garden. They'll do very little with the inside of the garden except remove a floor and improve ceiling heights. And it's really kind of disappointing after all this talk that they're coming forward with a really weak proposal. To the right on the top is a proposal by ASTM and Vishaan Chakrabarti. This would be a private-public partnership. You will note that they do not show the neighborhood being demolished. They show the neighborhood intact. If you go to the left to the MTA rendering, you'll see these big super talls down on 31st Street, which are disappointing to see. The ASTM plan has never said that they would need neighborhood demolition to fund this. They have a pretty well thought out proposal. It's not the proposal Rethink favors, but it's a sound proposal. Right below that, you see Rethink's proposal, which is based more on the original Grand Penn Station, and we have 3 different iterations of it we'll get to in a minute, but we also are not looking to see the neighborhood demolished. To the left is the plan that got a lot of noise recently from the Grand Penn Community Alliance. It would put a Bryant Park above the present station, have a smaller head house between there's sort of those black arches in front of 2 Penn Plaza. Regrettably, they had for the longest time not been suggesting anything in terms of neighborhood demolition, except perhaps towers to the north. More recently, they suggested they should build a station that extends under Block 780. And here you'll see they show large structures on Block 780, albeit they have encased the McKim-Mead and White Power Station in this building on the lower right-hand side, and they would preserve St. John the Baptist Church. But their timing wasn't great because the local electeds came out and said, we don't want to touch Block 780, and the governor came out a week later and said, we don't want to touch Block 780. And in between, they made this big splash, an unfortunate conceit to developing the neighborhood south of the station. What does this all mean? In 2016, Governor Cuomo came out with a proposal that said we put a big glass window on 8th Avenue. This was never realistic. These renderings that come out from the state are eyewash. Because of the different mechanical needs in Penn Station, you could never have a wall of glass that size at the station, albeit the aspiration was good. This I've told you about was the original MTA proposal. It has under the red X this atrium that's where the present taxiway is. They have since said we can't even afford to do that. They're in real trouble with the congestion pricing not going the way they wanted to, and general mismanagement and profligate spending. I think their plans for Penn Station are in disarray. That was by an architect named, that was by Architects FC Collaborative. This is with the influences of a guy named John McCaslin, and true to form with the MTA, they're fighting tooth and nail, having a mid-block train hall at 8th Avenue. Here they show this translucent block of light, which looks like it might be bringing natural light into the station. It is not, and even this has been withdrawn. Here's a note that just tells you from the Station Working Advisory Group that they miscalculated the needs for a larger footprint for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. And they've also miscalculated the cost, and they're now saying there's very little of the positives they've been promising for Penn Station that they can do. This is Vishaan's proposal, which I just told you does not propose any neighborhood demolition. This is his mid-block train hall, which is interesting in that most modern architecture is all glass. This would have travertine marble on the right. They're trying to do something to reclaim the glory of Penn Station. And the glasswork patterns are somewhat evocative of the original Penn Station. This, again, is Alex's idea. You can see their means of egress and ingress in these two entries on 8th Avenue. This fountain at times has shown some style of translucent base so that some light can come down to that part of the station. The fact of the matter is there is a trade-off here. You get a park on top of the station instead of a basketball arena, but there is going to be a large area of this that is about as charming as the baggage area at Heathrow. Alex would put a colonnade similar to the original Penn Station out under the bustle on 7th Avenue. Our architect at Rethink has had a plan B that shows this. I don't think this, it's me on architecture, but I wouldn't do this. I think the way that Vornado has this looking now is somewhat coherent and consistent, and I would focus efforts on the west side of 2 Penn Plaza. Rethink has tried to be more realistic. Getting the garden to move will be very difficult. Trump and James Dolan are very close, and Trump looks at the building as iconic, as many New Yorkers do. There may have been a time when you could have bought 2 Penn Plaza and extended the Penn Station site there, but Vornado's put $1 billion into the building and recently signed up a lot of long-term tenants. I don't think that's realistic. So the most unrealistic view is on the left, where a recreation of the whole original Penn Station would take place. To the right is one where 2 Penn Plaza stays in place, and to the further right is one where Madison Square Garden and 2 Penn Plaza stay in place. If the whole site were a recreation of the original Penn Station, it would look like this. So, you know, I know some of you may think we're crazy. This does happen in Europe. It's happened in Dresden and many other places. And then there's a reason it happens. When you have a sensational building, which this one was, and which you rarely see in Technicolor, it makes a big difference. That's a view. This is a view with the entire site being dedicated to Penn Station. This is a view if you left 2 Penn Plaza and Madison Square Garden in place. And you'll note that our architect, Richard Cameron, has the perimeter looks like the original Penn Station, and the sheathing on Madison Square Garden replicates some of the original Madison Square Garden, which was down near Madison Square Park, which is where some of you know Stanford White, the architect, was murdered. I'm happy to take some questions and answers. The tragedy that Penn Station is doing better, a sky bridge too far. I think we have made progress. I think that Block 780 is looks to have a fighting chance of being preserved. It looks like we will get more housing in the neighborhood. It looks like we will get more affordable housing in the neighborhood, but the ink isn't dry on the promises, and it's a long way from the promises to firm commitment. So are there any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Sam, let's drop the slide and we're finished with the slides, right?
I'll do that. Before I do that, let me just do 2 takeaways. We think there needs to be a bona fide independent review of through running. There are 2 FRA grants of $72 million each. The railroads say through running would be too expensive or it can't provide them the capacity that we need. The reports were commissioned by the railroads for the railroads and say what the railroads want. We think we need to have a report done on behalf of the public. And that day that John and his merry pranksters got the governor to promise an open competition, we feel she needs to do that. so we can get to the best Penn station that we can.
Nice, Sam. Appreciate this so
John,
much.
you can just make me stop. Should make me not the host, and it'll go away.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Just find it. There you go. Got it. Okay, great. Appreciate that. So, do we have any questions from anyone? Anyone want to jump in?
I have a question, John.
Go right in.
Hi, Sam. How are you?
Hey, Luana, how are you?
Seems like we've been going through this conversation for years already. I wanted to know about there was a conversation about moving, and I was hearing that Dolan was leaning towards moving Penn Station to Hudson Yards. Did you hear any conversation on that? And how would that affect the plan to refurbish Penn Station?
Well, look, I want to make clear that if we found the will collectively to move Madison Square Garden, that is the best result. It's a real compromise to have one of the biggest transit hubs in the world squished under there. I have not heard recently anything about moving to Hudson Yards. In fact, the Hudson Yards community has been pretty opposed to that. Now, I haven't spoken to them recently, but when this first came up and we had that as one of 3 locations, they did not like that at all because they had already created and thought they had agreement on a plan with Related about how that neighborhood would be developed. And it's part of why they're so upset that Related's now coming back with this casino idea and futzing around with what we're doing. Mm-hmm. I haven't revisited the idea of, if you had your original plan and the Related plan, would it make sense to put Madison Square Garden over there and accomplish some of the other things you've wanted? I don't think Dolan has any intention of moving it. In the past, he has said he feels that's too far from transportation. I think he's wrong about that. You have the 7, which is right there, that can get Westchester people to Grand Central Terminal very quickly. And you're right on the backside of the Moynihan and the High Line, and you can get into the train station very quickly. So that could be an attractive part. But Erik Bottcher was actually pushing for the Hudson Yard site. But when Community Board 4 and types really came out against it, everyone's backed off that. And if they, in response to the casino, were to say maybe Madison Square Garden wouldn't be so bad, we'd certainly be open to that. But I think a lot of this chatter about Dolan wanting to move is not well founded. From anything I'm hearing, he's, particularly perhaps because of his friendship with Trump, he's like, hey, I don't have to move. I don't want to move. I put $1 billion into this building within the past 10 years. Please leave me alone.
So with that being said, in one of your renditions where you there's a rebuilding around Penn Station, I noticed that that the length or the width of the street is changed. How would that rendition work in terms of encapsulating Penn State, Madison Square Garden, and going around? How does that work with the block?
Well, we would not. So one of the digital renderings make it look like 31st Street is wider than it is. It was
right.
It was just so we could get the perspective down the street. We would not change 31st Street at all. And I am told that actually that garden in place, we can fit around or it would be on top of the foundation of the existing Penn Station. So it does get tight at the streets, but it's not removing sidewalk. Now there might, Vornado is increasing the 7th Avenue sidewalk size, and you might do that on 8th Avenue, but you wouldn't be losing sidewalk. If anything, we try to add sidewalk. And in increasing parts of the city, people are doing that for, pedestrian and reasons, and we just don't need to support auto traffic the way we, were committed to in the past.
Well, that's a segue to another subject, but in one of your renditions, also you had the plan that Bottcher and Hochul and everyone was in favor of. There were tall towers, like 4 commercial tall towers, and then like 4 residential places that were smaller. And wouldn't that change the environment and the access to sunlight and greenery, so to speak, in
Yes.
those areas if that rendition went through?
Yes, it would. They're not as tall as what was going on. And like the one thing I do want to say is we had Matt from from Tony's office speak to us last week, and that is really a concept release. That is showing everything maxed out and done all at once. I don't know that it would happen this way. I'm not trying to sell that plan. And there are people like John Massengale who have said this is not the plan any neighborhood would support. Our point of view is, look, we're not saying you can never develop a building or never develop a tall building in the neighborhood, but we look to Bryant Park and environs as a better example. They're old buildings. There's a park. There's the public library. There's some older modern structures. There are 2 new tall commercial buildings on the northwest corner. One is Bank of America, and the one to the south might be it's Facebook or somebody like that. So we think it should be more organic. But I would say this for Tony's plan, because there's no eminent domain. Even the residential market isn't that hot that people are just going to start tearing the neighborhood down immediately. Although there are, look, between City of Yes and the Midtown South rezoning, there's going to be plenty of real estate pressure in Manhattan. One thing through running does is it expands the region's core, and it makes places like Paterson, New Jersey, and Jamaica more relevant, easier to get in and out of the city, and hopefully would dampen, it won't eliminate, but will dampen some of that pressure to tear everything down, which, I mean, the one thing, and that's why I like the pictures at the beginning of this program, you look at that neighborhood, and on the block south of Penn Station, there are about 6 to 10 buildings that are eligible to be landmarked, and they're by absolute trophy architects, not to mention the small businesses and residents who live there. Any other questions? Thank you, Luana.
I don't want to take up all the time. Thank you. So I just wanted to say, I mean, I don't understand if through running is a more efficient, more less expensive way of making the transit system better at Penn Station. What do you think is the big holdup?
I think for some reason, and it's an excellent question, for some reason, some of you are old enough to remember Get Smart, but for some reason, a cone of silence or a cone of idiocy has been dropped on the New York region. And this should have been resolved years ago, but the railroads have gotten away with opposing it and pretending it can't happen or suggesting it can't happen. And they commission these expert reports that have silenced the usual skeptical government, public, and press in New York. We're really making inroads on that. But for some reason, they have been able to defer and pretend it can't happen here. We are really challenging that, but and I'm just going to be frank, the Regional Plan Association has been complicit in this. The Municipal Art Society has been complicit in this. There are faux civics that cheerlead these crazy reports and the idea that we can't do through running here, and it's just plain wrong. And we're just going to have to. You know me, I'm fighting it with every bit of my fiber. How can it be in place in all these other cities and more? And they've had it some of them have had it for decades, like Paris. And we're fighting it and want to tear buildings down to use a 1950s technology and expand terminal tracks below the Penn Station. It's really stupid. Through running is one of the few win-wins from a policy standpoint that you can ever dream up. Faster, better, cheaper. They all say that's what they want. That's never what they do. But
right.
I think people have been overly deferential to the railroads, and the 2 groups I mentioned have not been up to the task, and I don't say that lightly, but you know, it's just the fact of the matter.
Thank you. I still cry when I walk past the former Penn Hotel location. So I just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Don't you, Sam, don't you think I think we discussed this before. It's all, and I look at it like similar to NYCHA, you know, there's more ways to fix that building. There's more ways, there's European methods and so forth. What they choose to do is they want to pursue a demolition policy, and they want to make lots more money by demolishing, and by generating the traffic through Midtown, of course, is going to contain you know, that core mission of profits. You know, they bring everybody in and congest the Midtown area without, but it's not easier on the public whatsoever. You know, that it doesn't change the platforms, it doesn't change our travel, it causes us to switch trains and be huddled into Penn area.
I agree, John. Let me close, because I know you have other people. I would say that, look, if you go to London, they're on their third through running iteration. It's a much more livable city than New York City at this point, and that's only going to increase. And I did see somebody in the chat, I think it was Matt Robinson, said you're going to have to do a lot of track and platform changes, and that is true. But we have a plan that even the other side has looked at and said that's a credible way to convert the station over 6 to 10 years. Keep never taking the station out of service, and you would be able to do this, frankly, with less construction impacts than some of the nonsense they've been doing there for the past few years. So in London, when they first started it, there was an abandoned tunnel under the Thames River and London Bridge Station, and very inexpensively, they created north-south connectivity. They've been so happy with that, they've added 2 more through running iterations, and the one they're presently working on, Crossrail 2, and this is important for us because everybody wants to think we're, you know, masters of no. Crossrail 2 is predicted to generate 100 billion pounds, not dollars, pounds, in economic growth. And through running would do the same for New York City. And, you know, we love New York City, but people who don't love New York City hate the congestion, how difficult it is to get around. You create a really fluid transit system, you're increasing the quality of life for 50 miles to 75 miles out for 20 million people. Even if they don't take the trains directly, the economic impact is going to help them. And the access to housing, educational opportunities, et cetera, is tremendous. There are people for ethnic reasons who want to live in Brooklyn. They don't want to live anywhere else, but they could work at Hackensack Meridian in Hackensack if it didn't take 2.5 hours to be on the train. And that capability should be available. So I will close because I know you have other speakers, but anyone who wants to, you can please get in touch with me. And Matthew, you can get in touch with me offline. I'll answer any questions you have. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate the time.